What's up, y'all? This is Reggie, aka Speeding Bullet, with my co-host B, 3 exclamation points, bringing you the political perspective.
Savvy enough to hear certain things and not automatically be acting.
Elon Musk kind of like snapped on Epstein.
This is like 3 more seasons of Landman right here. Just
yeah, definitely. Where the natural resources are ransacked, and these countries are normally not better after the United States comes over there and just starts trashing their country.
And always remember, if you're not political, you do not have a perspective. Now let's talk some politics. All right, thanks for tuning into this week's political perspective. I am Reggie, aka Speeding Bullet, here with B, 3 exclamation points. And always remember, if you are not political, then you do not have a perspective. So always a lot going on, B. And I think I said maybe a couple of weeks ago that the war in Iran is going to be just dominating the news, just in general, but just kind of like how kind of like ridiculous it is being in war, but having Trump as a wartime president. But the latest is, and the latest is really for me like 2 days ago, but there's been some developments today. But we are in the middle of a 2-week ceasefire that Trump announced that there would be really a suspension of military strikes against Iran. And this is to allow, for some diplomatic negotiations. And it is interesting that there is going to be some negotiations. And Trump has been saying that it's a complete and total victory.
What's going on? They're militarily defeated, and now we're going to open up the Gulf with or without them. But that'll be open. We're going to be, or the Strait as they call it, and I think it's going to go pretty quickly. And if it doesn't, we'll be able to finish it off one way or the other. It's going well. The Navy's gone, the Air Force is gone, all anti-aircraft is gone. The leaders are gone. The whole place is gone. So we'll see how it turns out. So it's JD and Steve and Jared. They have a good team, and they meet tomorrow. We'll see how it all works out.
When there's a victory, there is no negotiations. That you set the rules, you set the parameters. But it's interesting that Iran has proven to be, if not a difficult foe for the United States, an interesting foe for the United States. I mean, I think we all who are always going to be praying for our service members who are over there fighting in the name of our country. So we're always going to keep them in our thoughts and prayers. So we're going to root for us to be victorious. But how this war has been administrated and really how it's going to end, will reflect kind of our standing in the world as Americans and as this, air quote, like beacon of freedom that we claim to be. But Trump is kind of shitting all over that. But so Trump and his team with JD Vance is in the middle of negotiating some type of continued peace with Iran. What's interesting is Pakistan. It's been reported that Pakistan is the country that is really kind of spearheading all of these talks between, like being the middle person between Washington, the Trump administration, and the Iranian administration. And Pakistan kind of did something a little crazy. They were sending different proposals to each side, and there was some confusion on what was agreed upon. That caused some continuous fighting because one side is reading one proposal that's not the same as the other side. So Pakistan, which is not really a major kind of a major like player in world politics, but Pakistan being a majority Muslim country, had some relationships with Iran, so they had the ability to kind of get them to the table. But it just kind of shows you how difficult diplomacy is, even for countries that just trying to get things moving. That they were actually sending the wrong information, between the countries. So that doesn't bode well for the types of conversations that we hope that the U.S. and Iran are having. We hope that they can sit down or get on the phone or a Zoom call and try to come up with some kind of way to bring an end to this war. But like I said, Iran is looking like a difficult adversary, and they have some cards that they've been playing to kind of keep some pressure on the administration. But we're gonna have to see where this goes. We should all know that any type of ceasefire with the United States is not binding with Israel. So Israel is not necessarily at the table. They are moving at the direction, maybe not, maybe we are moving at the direction of Israel. But as for right now, Israel is not a part of these of the ceasefire. So you should expect Israel to continue on their offensive nature, irregardless of what happens between Iran and United States.
Question.
But
what do you say to the people? Because, okay, so I see a lot of people saying that Trump got the Strait of Hormuz open, or the ceasefire is good for the reopening of the Strait of Hormuz. And I see a lot of people saying, well, it was open before the war started. So what exactly was accomplished? What are the, if you can, what is MAGA seeing to where they're claiming the Strait of Hormuz being open as a positive outcome to this war? And mostly what I see is people saying it was already open. What's the point?
Yeah, so
you wasted $39 billion.
Yeah, I think MAGA has adopted the personality disorder of the president.
Okay.
And that is an inability to admit any type of miscalculation, any type of mistakes, any types of things that were not planned properly, and to spin something as a victory that clearly is not. I mean, so the Strait of Hormuz was open to anyone that wanted to flow through there since the beginning of time. And to now claim that getting it open is somehow a victory when all you're doing is going back to the status quo, which is that cannot be considered a victory, and it's still not certain on what's going to happen with the Strait when all of this is over. Iran has now seen this as a way to be able to extract really a toll for any ships going through there.
Yeah.
And they're going to be looking to get some type of reparation for this war, as a part of their ceasefire surrender. And and one of their proposals is saying that they'll recoup and rebuild their country based on now the tolls that they'll be receiving from ships going through. So it's just MAGA adopting the personality of the president, where they just have an inability to admit defeat. I mean, Trump is still talking about the 20. He's still talking about the 2020. Yeah. So I mean, they just have an inability to live in reality. Unfortunately. So a couple things on that. Well, one thing on the Epstein front, which we've talked about how the Epstein files have just totally disappeared as a result of the Iran war. But there was a statement today from First Lady Melania Trump, who she had an official denial of any ties to Jeffrey Epstein. And what she did was she kind of put the onus back onto the victims to come forward and to testify and all of these things. And to me that feels very difficult to tell these victims to come forward when the people who are the accusers, the government is already saying that no one's done anything wrong. So these victims that have made statements, that have provided, whatever's been asked of them by the federal government, and I would assume I would hope that the federal government is doing some type of investigation. But if the government is already saying, and that's one of the reasons why Pam Bondi was terminated and fired. But if the government is already saying there's no way that anybody is going to be prosecuted, then what's the point? I mean, and no one can think that these victims have more resources than the power of the federal government to turn over every stone. If there's any stone to be turned over. So it's just an interesting thing for her to say that these victims need to come forward. Victims have came forward. I think the real message needs to be that the federal government needs to investigate these claims. And it's a lot of really crazy claims out there that have not just been fully investigated. So it's just interesting that she would put that on the victims and not on the government to actually do a fuller and just a much more thorough, unredacted investigation. If there's so much
thing really that simple,
if there's so many things that need to be redacted, maybe there's more to the story than they're letting us know, and I'm sure it is. There's no way in the world that the estimates of over 1,000 victims and 2 people went to jail. Like no one went to jail dealing with any of the money, like any of the transport of these victims. You're telling me 2 people and only 1 person actually went to jail. The other person committed suicide, Jeffrey Epstein. But
yeah,
the FBI in their estimate said it's over 1,000 victims over a 20 plus year span, and there's no one that can be charged with any crimes but Jeffrey Epstein. Interesting. And I don't think anybody thinks that's possible at all.
It's really disingenuous when we have millions more pages or millions more files of redacted. What we have is already redacted, and we have more redacted. We know there's more files that are redacted. So it's just really disingenuous by Melania.
Yeah, absolutely. So a couple more things I just want to touch on. Pete Hegseth fired the chief of staff of the Army. So pretty much top general in the Army during a war.
Did not see this.
Fired. That makes a lot of sense to just fire the top general in the middle of a war. But that kind of checks for Pete Hegseth and kind of his administration, the Trump administration, and kind of how they deal with just with people who have any type of voice other than parroting what they say. But what I think is interesting is what I was watching. I was watching a news show, and someone commented that Pete Hegseth was in the Army, but was not promoted to a particular rank. I think it might have been captain or colonel or something. And as a result of that is the reason why he has taken up this type of attitude with, firing generals who have reached places, who had reached ranks in the military that he wasn't able to reach, and really more of just his anger towards the Army than actually something that makes any sense personnel wise. Like when you get to be a 4 or 5 star general, you have had a decorated career. Normally not fired, but within the past year, he's fired at least 12 top military officials in our military. So something to keep an eye on. But yeah, so Pete Hegseth has fired the chief of staff of the Army, who is a top general in the military. Staying on military, the Trump administration have proposed a $1.5 trillion with a T trillion defense budget, which is $500 billion more than the budget from last year. And this particular budget is obviously the largest defense budget in the history of the country and probably the history of the world. 1.5 trillion. Now you might be asking, like, what has to get cut for us to be able to afford a $1.5 trillion defense budget? So pretty much the administration is cutting roughly 10% of all domestic spending in the U.S. And some of these things are scientific research, higher education, bills and grants. They are many cuts to infrastructure projects, energy assistant things like LIHEAP.
Yes.
Yes, and if anybody's gotten a gas bill this winter, it's ridiculous. So they cutting that. You ain't, and you already have to be making no money to qualify for it.
Yeah.
I can't qualify for it. You can't qualify for it. You got to be making no money, and they're even taking that away. So things like LIHEAP, and these are some of the things that when people are talking about politics and they're talking about some of the proposals and the bills that affect people and affect people that have the least, these are the things that have to be mentioned. These cuts. But yeah, I mean, I guess more missiles, being bought by Lockheed Martin is much more important than somebody's health care or their ability to pay bills in the winter. But yeah, 1.5 trillion is the proposed defense budget for next year. So that will go through Congress, and we'll see if that is passed. But you can expect more cuts. And I was thinking about this, B. How much more cuts can the government make to programs? Like, it just seemed like this administration is the administration of cuts. Yeah. Like everything has been cut. What's left? And what does, so my question is, if all these programs, all these things are being cut, is my taxes going to be cut? Because we don't have to pay for these things, right? So I should be getting much more money on my taxes.
No, that's not how working. And so this is confused. I really need a new regime in the sense of, for me personally, I don't like what's happening. I don't like how what's happening, what is done to my thinking as far as politically. Anything, this defense requests budget 1.5 trillion is so ridiculous. All my questions now are, how does this make him more money? And for me to see that type of request for the budget for defense and the programs that get cuts, that's getting cut, it just makes me feel like hiding your riches in fake defense charges is how you plan to get richer. It's so insane, the number of things that people need that have to get cut in order for this defense budget, like you said, the largest ever recorded. It's hard for me to make sense of it, other than this is how you personally get richer. Because, like you just said, taxes aren't going to go down. The deficit is just getting greater. They convinced us to care about a deficit somehow. Who gives a fuck about a 39 trillion? What a trillion? What's the deficit? 30 something odd $trillion. That's not going to get cut down in anybody's lifetime. So how do you even care about that as a citizen? That's one they pulling over our eyes consistently. But I just don't get it. So with that being said, to go back to my original, I just need a new regime. I need something to change, because I don't like how I'm forced to think about things that's happening politically. None of it makes sense, and none of it is done seemingly to benefit the people who live in this country and pay taxes, i.e. you and I and everyone on this podcast.
So speaking of things that don't make sense, were you aware that there was a airport in Florida that was named after Trump this week?
I saw that in West Palm, right? The West Palm?
Yes.
Yeah.
Shout out to James in Florida for those great. A couple more things, and then I'm going to get into some numbers. Trump's ballroom project has been blocked for the 80th time. So they keep already knocked the building down. So I'm almost like, might as well just let him. But there is this notion or this idea that rules matter. So if Trump doesn't care about rules, he could have actually went through the process of doing renovations to the East Wing of the White House, but he just sent a demo and just knocked it down, and now they're fighting in court. It's just ridiculous. But it's the type of things that it ends up being, like you said, like just so polarizing and crazy that we're talking about this, or that we have to go to court because the president doesn't want to follow just some of the basic rules that we have that we've been following just pretty much forever.
Yeah.
A couple of numbers. Inflation is at 2.4%. You know, Trump is always talking about inflation, but I believe at the end of the Biden administration, inflation was at 2.4%. So Trump hasn't delivered on his promises of lower inflation. Unemployment rate is at 8%. It's a little higher than it was last month. Black unemployment is over 12%. You should know that when the national unemployment rate goes up, black unemployment, because we the last hired in the first fire, the black unemployment rate is always going to be higher than the national average. We all know about gas. Gas is at $4.11 a gallon, up 13 cents from last week. And the last thing, just for you guys' record, Trump so far in this administration has spent 144 billion taxpayer dollars playing golf in this term, which is twice as much as Obama spent during this point in his presidency, and twice as much as Biden spent during his entire 4 years. So there you have it, B. You got anything else for us?
Hide money in the golf budget too, because that's $144 billion playing golf. Like what? Million. I mean,
it's all the same, right, B?
Yeah, whatever.
Billions, trillions.
I don't. Yeah, the numbers are cartoonish, and someone's getting rich, and it's not us. So,
yeah, unfortunately. But once again, shout out to our military. Shout out to our vets that are out there. Fighting a war. They don't have a choice. They signed up for it, but we want them all to come back safe and sound.
That's a fact.
So that's all we have. Once again, I am Reggie, aka Speed and Bullet. This is the 3 explanation points. And always remember, if you are not political, you do not have a perspective.
Thank you for watching this video. Please remember to like, subscribe, and hit that notification bell.